Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. How do you discern the difference between fear-mongering and true concern? Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to this week's episode of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and today we are speaking with Scarlen. Scarlen is a home birth mom from Chattanooga, Tennessee. She's a wife to Manny, and together they have 5 boys. After a rough hospital birth with her first, she knew there had to be a different way to birth. When she became pregnant with her second boy, she decided she would birth at home and has not looked back. Her love for birth and postpartum has led her to create a thriving home birth group in Chattanooga, Tennessee called Chattanooga Home Birth Community. The group includes over 400 home birth advocates who are mothers and birth workers local to the area. This group has successfully connected mothers in all stages of pregnancy to doulas, midwives, and other home birth moms. So today, we are going to hear how Scarlen and Manny cut through the opinions of care providers and ask deeper questions to get to the heart of several matters. Their ability to advocate will most certainly refresh and empower you. All right, let's get started. Please remember that the opinions of my guest may not necessarily reflect my own and vice versa. And the show is not medical advice. It's an educational tool, so continue to take empowered responsibility for your health and your family. Scarlen, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
Oh, I am thrilled to have you, and I am thrilled to hear your birth stories. You've got some really, really interesting experiences that you've had. Before we jump into those, would you mind taking a moment to just introduce yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, so I'm Scarlen. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I am married. It'll be married for 10 years this upcoming October. We have 5 kiddos, all boys. Yeah, we just have fun here. It gets wild in the house. It gets loud, but it's fun and everything, I could ever expect and dream of and hope for in a family. I'm so blessed to be able to work from home and run a thriving community of over 400 home birth advocates here in the Chattanooga area. That's my pride and joy here in the community.
I cannot wait to hear how that unfolded and what you've created. That is absolutely astounding, beautiful, wonderful, all of good adjectives that I can think of. I'm so excited to hear about it. And let's talk about what got you to this point. So, if you don't mind, would you take us back to the beginning? Just kind of let us know, where were you and your husband when you decided to become pregnant for the first time in terms of what you wanted to have as your birth experience?
So when I first became pregnant, it was back in 2017. I knew absolutely nothing about pregnancy and birth. Um, and at that time, we really just trusted the medical system. We thought they're professionals, they've been to school for this, and, that we should trust them. Everything that they say is trustworthy and you're fine. I did everything. I did the regular testing. I went the hospital birth route. It was a birthing center attached to a hospital, but the experience, as I learned after, was very hospital like. I did have a midwife though, and I think that was good. She was a really nice woman. But again, once I went into that birth setting, I'm usually a very opinionated, strong woman, as my husband tells me I am. But during that time, you just, because you don't know anything about birth and pregnancy and you're not really prepared or given informed consent, you do whatever you're told.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. Looking back, it was a very long birth. It was a very painful birth, not because yeah, physically it's always it can be very painful, but emotionally painful for me because I went in there not knowing anything, and after just thinking about it and running through the entire birth for the past few years now, I do understand that and I take accountability that I should have prepared a lot more, but again I trusted the experts and I went with everything that they told me to do. One thing I did know though was that I wanted to have as naturally as possible because I'm a big baby when it comes to medical interventions. I am scared of surgery and I do not like huge needles. So I knew that I didn't want an epidural and I knew that I did not want a C-section. So neither of them happened, but I did feel like I was a huge inconvenience to the hospital team because I didn't want any of that. And it was 23-hour birth. Yeah, so at some point they kept offering, and I didn't know this, but they kept offering the epidural. They kept offering, other pain medications. And I had told my husband, I'm not opposed, but I would prefer not to. So, thank the Lord that even when he knew nothing about birth and pregnancy, he knew how to advocate and support for me. And he would tell them, no, she does not want this. No, she does not want this until transition time comes and I had no choice but to just birth without any pain medication. Because at some point, during transition time, I was questioning my entire life. Like, maybe I do want that epidural, but it was too late at that point. So, like, all right, well, I'll write it out. He was a big boy. He was 8 pounds. I'm only 4'11. And at that time, I weighed like maybe 120. So he was a big boy. He had shoulder dystocia. Afterwards, the midwife tells me that I shouldn't have big babies anymore. Like, if you know what's good for you, you shouldn't have big babies anymore. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. And one thing that I remember that led me to not ever want to birth at a hospital anymore was the midwife clearly telling me, Scarlen, if you don't push this baby out on this push, we are going to give you a C section. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I pushed with all my might, and the baby came out. I tore pretty bad. And yeah, it was in the movies, I always saw that the mother wanted their baby right away, wanted to hold the baby, was crying, with joy, but I didn't feel any of that.
Mm.
I was in pain. I was a little angry that I was threatened in that manner, and I didn't want to hold my baby. The midwife
Mm.
said, "Hey, do you want to hold your baby?" I said, "No. Can you just hand the baby over to my husband?"
Mm.
And that's how it went.
Mm.
After that, I knew I never wanted to do that again.
Yep. I'm so glad that that you were able to make a change after that and see that scenario for what it was. You had done all of this beautiful work, you had gone through 23 hours of labor essentially on your own with your husband, no help from this medical staff that's just trying to push an epidural on you. You make it to the finish line and then they kind of come in and spoil that experience as well. I'm so sorry that it happened that way and that it unfolded that way.
Yeah, I felt really bad about the way that it unfolded, and it during my postpartum, it just made it so much harder because I did experience very bad baby blues. And at that time, I didn't know why I was experiencing what I was experiencing, why I felt so sad, and I felt damaged. And
Mm.
those are feelings that I've never been through because I consider myself to be very emotionally stable. I can regulate my emotions very well, but at that time I just couldn't. And
Mm.
I was like, I would tell my husband, "What is wrong with me?" But I learned afterwards, after a lot of processing, that it was birth trauma.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yep.
so I've accepted it. I've learned from it, and I've gotten a lot stronger from it.
Hmm. And you can hear that when you share that story right now. You can hear that that is something that you have taken. You have thought through it. You know what's happened, and then now you have a perspective of, okay, and that happened, and all of these other things. It sounds very integrated into your story and who you are as a mother in a positive light, despite the fact that it was something negative that happened. That's always really beautiful and profound to hear.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what another big difference was at that time, my husband and I were not believers.
Mm.
Well, he was atheist and I was knee deep in paganism. So it was a completely different experience, my first birth and my other births, having, God involved and complete surrender to him just made a world of a difference.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I mean, I don't know if you've heard my story, but very similarly, where I was not a believer with my first, and it was actually my first birth that kind of flipped everything on its head and made me realize there was something else out there. So I'm really curious if at any point you want to weave that in whenever it happens in the story. I know that I would love to hear that story of how everything changed for you. I'm sure the audience would as well. And
Yeah.
there was a big jump between, well, a good gap between your first and second, right? It was 2017 and then 2021.
Yeah, it was a really big gap. I was working in the corporate world at that
Mhm.
time. I was the boss babe making money. My husband was staying at home with the baby, and I was trying to get to a point where we could make enough money to have another baby. And I was on birth control, so I did everything the culture told me to, like leave the baby at home. Well, the culture tells you to put him in daycare, but I couldn't do that. So husband stayed at home. Yeah, just chased the corporate world until
Okay.
2021 hit. We had a complete radical, change in faith. Just because, back in 2020, 2021, everything was crazy. And we were trying to make, sense of it. And my husband, again, thank the Lord for him and his advocacy because while I was at work, turns out that he was, studying the Bible and listening to, Christian speakers. And he he tells me at some point like, hey, I think I'm gonna dive into Christianity. If you want to do that with me, I would be happy to, but if you don't, I understand. And I think that I was just waiting for him to say something to say that, because immediately I was like, yes, let's do that together. I was waiting, for something to take me out of something, to take me out of paganism, because I didn't want to do it anymore. It didn't make sense to me anymore, but I was very entrenched in it. I didn't know how to get out of it myself. So he just tells me, hey, do you want to do this with me? And I was like, yes, yes, I do.
Wow.
And that's how it happened.
That is, I mean, that's beautiful. Like this idea of, you kind of being in this spot and feeling like, I don't really want to be here, but I don't have anything to take me out of it. It felt probably like there's no way out of this. And then for him to come along and be like, hey, why don't we like try this different thing together? Why don't we explore this together? That's so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm so lucky. I'm so
Oh,
blessed.
oh my goodness. Do you know what it was for him that had him start like, oh, maybe I should read the Bible? Like, was there any specific event or was it just kind of this like this inner like kind of push?
I think it was both, an inner push. And then we were living in Washington and it was just so out of hand with everything. And it felt unreal that we were
Mm,
experiencing all of these things. And we knew that there was something wrong with what was happening, but we didn't know what. And we didn't know, who to talk to about it. So he
mm.
just turned to the Bible.
Thank you for sharing. That is so beautiful. Wow. Okay, so you have had this experience, this transformation right around the time that you are becoming pregnant or are pregnant for the second time. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was pregnant. We were thinking like, shoot, we can't do this anymore. We can't stay in this state because our values are under attack. And we tried, staying there and making a change and being bold. But we also had our son, and we were on Antifa's hit list. So they were going around our home and taking pictures of it. And we're like, yeah, I would love to stay and change, but we have a son and we need to worry about his
Oh
safety.
my
So we were like,
word.
all right, let's go. So we moved to Tennessee. We knew no one here. We had never visited the area. We never even visited the home that we bought. We trusted our realtor. He did a FaceTime, showed us like, hey, so this is a house, this is a room. We're like, we'll take it. And then we left. I was in my first trimester of pregnancy when we left, and I usually get very bad nausea when I'm pregnant in the first trimester, but this time again, it was God. I had really no nausea, so I was able to travel cross country not feeling nauseous. I was tired and sleeping, but no nausea this time.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you arrive to your new home that you've bought. And what did you decide in terms of this pregnancy? You had this hospital experience the previous time. You're in Chattanooga now. You've had all of these life changes. What went on with that?
Yes, so even though we were in Chattanooga, in a state where it was a lot more freedom than we had in Washington, there were still protocols in the hospital, and we knew that we didn't want to do that. And I just didn't want to birth at a hospital anymore just because it was a bad experience. And we have no birthing centers here in Chattanooga. So really the only option was to birth at home. And I tell my husband, like, hey, I did it in a hospital with no medication, so why not just do it at home? Of course, he was hesitant, but we had no other options. And so I Googled in between, breaks at work, I Googled midwives and I came across my midwife, and she so happened to have a spot available. And at that time, my mindset was still very medicalized. So she taught me about informed consent. She gave me she always would give me my options, and I thought that I had to take them, but she taught me that I can say no.
Mm.
And I would just tell her, really? I can say no? Like, yeah, you can say no. So yeah, I trust, we built a very great relationship and I trusted her. So when she did, tell me about the any testing that came up, because my mind was still medicalized, I would say yes, but I was so happy that she gave me the option and the space to say no.
Mm.
So yeah, once we met her and she was able to calm my husband down and he was comfortable with her, we were like, all right, let's do this. And so we did it. The pregnancy was very smooth. I was working from home. I was dealing, though, with the pressure and the coercion of getting the COVID-19 vaccine. I was the only one in the entire building. I worked at a call center at this time and I was a trainer. I was the only one in the entire call center, and there was about maybe 300, 400 people that said no and stood my ground. A lot of people said no at first, but you get coerced. You'd said that you're going to lose your job. So a lot of people obviously said no. But we were baby Christians and we're like, no, if God was able to provide everything for us to be able to move cross country and give us everything, He's going to provide for us in the event that I get fired. So I kept saying no, no, and no. And at that time, our management, like, why are you saying no? Like, this is a mandate. Do you understand what a mandate means? I'm like, yes, I do. It's a mandate. Yes, it's coming from our government, but it's not a law. Do you know the
Mhm.
difference between a mandate and a law?
Go girl.
So I had to teach them the difference between a mandate and a law. It was every day a Zoom meeting saying, hey, can you get vaccinated? No. Hey, can you get vaccinated today? No. Well, you're going to lose your job. I'd be like, okay.
All right.
So they demoted me and they sent me into, I don't know if they were trying to like kill my confidence
Mhm.
or kill my ego, but I was like, I'm a child of God. I can put my ego aside. I don't care.
Girl, you are preaching. I'm
Yeah.
gonna
So,
cry.
yeah. So I kept saying no, 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 even though they excluded me from everything. They told me that they wanted to put me in a room with other unvaccinated people and have me die. I was like, all right, if I die, then I go to heaven. They sent me to work from home while everyone else, could work, at the call center.
Oh,
They would say
bummer.
they would say things like, I know, right? They would say things like, well, Scarlen, you're in leadership. You're a leader and you're salaried, so you have to set a good example. And I'd be like, I am setting a good example by, letting people know that they can choose and choose to vaccinate or not. So I know that I irritated them so much, and at the end I had to leave the job because even though Tennessee did have a special session to make law where you can't force anyone to do it. At that point, there was a lot of retaliation and a lot of things that they were saying I did that I didn't do. And I was like, yeah, I know what you're trying to do. So I'm just going to leave.
Mm.
And so I left my job, and thankfully I was able to find a work from home position where it's very flexible and I do a lot of really great work. So
Mm.
God provided.
Yep. Yep. I
Yeah.
am so impressed. I mean, truly, just wow. Good for you. How amazing. What confidence you clearly had in Jesus, in your faith to know, like, no, yeah, I'm not doing it. Yep. I'm not doing it. And he will provide. And he did. I just have chills. This is
Yeah, and my
beautiful.
poor midwife, I would just tell her these stories and she'd be horrified.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even though I had all of that stress going on, the birth for me was everything I could have, dreamed of because I went into labor. I was here at home. My sisters were here with me. Well, one of my sisters was here with me. Once labor started, I was like, you know what? Let me do some laundry real quick. So I did some laundry. We were having lunch, so very different from, the hospital experience where the first contraction, I was like, I need to go to the hospital. Like, no, let me relax. Let my body, do its thing. And my husband called the midwife, and he was a pretty big baby. He was 9.5 pounds, also shoulder dystocia. The only difference, though, is I was able to move around because with the
Mm-hmm.
first one, I had to, for some reason, they didn't want me to move. I had to do it on my back. So I was able to move around. It was my sister's first birth that she had ever witnessed. So that was interesting. But I was so happy that she was here because between her and my husband, they were taking turns, giving me water, putting a water rag on my forehead. And of course, the birth was again painful, but I had this trust in God and my midwife. And my husband prayed, my midwife prayed, everyone prayed in the room. And during transition time, and this is why I love giving birth, during transition time, you could feel God in the room. You can just feel Him. And it makes me want to cry every time I talk about it because it's almost like you can reach and you can physically feel Him. But you can't really do that. But that's when and my mind's like, you know what? I'm going to completely surrender, give it all to you. And the baby came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, your story, and we're 2 babies in of 5 babies. It just screams transformed life. This, if nothing else, this is what I want listeners to hear. And home birth is so beautiful to talk about. It is such an amazing thing. But the point, like the truth of these stories that are shared, it's so much deeper than a birth story. It is a glimpse into what life can be like in the kingdom of God. And you have shown that so beautifully and Scarlen unexpectedly, based on like, I didn't know this is what you were going to be sharing about. I didn't realize the depth of this. And it just gives me this overwhelming sense of gratitude for, wow, Jesus really does transform people. How amazing.
Yeah, He does. And, I know people think I'm crazy for saying that I love to give birth and I love transition time, but this is why I love it because you can feel Him. And it's so hard to explain, but I hope listeners can kind of understand where I'm coming from.
Mm. I mean, if they can hear it in your, they can hear it in your spirit, just the way that you're explaining everything. How can you not want that? How can you not want that depth of intimacy and relationship? It's overwhelming. So thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this. What a beautiful transformation. And so you had this baby at home, big baby, shoulder dystocia. Again, though, it resolved by you being able to move around. How did you feel after that birthing experience?
I felt great.
Yeah.
I felt like, wow, like I did this at home
Yeah.
and with no pressure of a C-section, no one coming to, watch me. Because later I also learned from my husband that with the first birth, there were a bunch of people in the room because I'm guessing they had never experienced a physiological birth with no medication. So they were just watching me, and I didn't know that. But no one was watching me other than the people that I wanted in the room with me. And I wanted my baby. I wanted to hold him. I was
Yeah.
obsessed with him. He smelled so good, full of verdicts, but he smelled so good, and everything was great. He did have a tongue tie, but I breastfed through that until I was able to get it corrected. But postpartum, no baby blues this
Mm.
time. I was very supported with my mom and my sister here. So it was great. Physically, I felt like I could, get up and walk. Although my mom said no. She said you need a rest. So I'm like,
Good, good,
listen
good.
to my mom. But yeah, I felt great.
Wow. Okay, so that's 2021. And then your next pregnancy is kind of interesting. So I think we're going to focus a good bit here. Let me know when that was and anything that happened between that second birth and third birth that's really pertinent for us to understand.
Yeah, so at 2021, had our second baby. I loved it. So I started to learn more about birth and pregnancy. So 2022 hits, yeah, because I had my babies 2023. 2022 hits, and I just my husband has like such an intuition with all of our babies. He tells me, "Hey, you should take a pregnancy test. I think you're pregnant." So we're like, you know what? You seem to be right quite often, so let me do it. So I did. I was pregnant, and after you take that pregnancy test, like all of the symptoms come, and this one it came. with a force. I was super nauseous. Nothing that I wanted to eat would stay. My poor husband would go to the grocery store every day to find new foods that I would like, and I didn't like them. I never wanted to eat anything. And it was strange to me, where I was like, yeah, I guess, this is what it is. I tell my midwife, and she was like, yeah, of course I'll take you on.
Mm.
I got an ultrasound. I went to our local pregnancy resource center to get a ultrasound. And the lady that was doing my ultrasound, she was so nice, but she scared me. I was telling her about my plans for our third baby and, what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. And then she's just like, well, you're going to have to change your plans. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, my mind immediately went to the negative. I was like, did I lose my baby? And I almost started crying. And I was just like, why? Like, well, look at the screen. And I'm just like, okay. Like, I see my womb. And then she was like, there's two in there. And I'm just like, whoa, two? And I was like, can you show me? Because I didn't know what I was looking at. And she's like, there's one and there's two. And yeah, it was silence after that. I didn't even know that twins ran in my family, but apparently after I told my mom, they do. And then we tell my husband, and the way that we told him, we didn't really say anything at first. He comes into the room, and the lady that was doing the ultrasound points, and I point too, and he's just like, "Oh, beautiful, a baby." And then she says, "No, there's two." And he's like, "What? There's two?" And the funny thing is, the night before, we were joking. We're like, "What if it's twins? What if you feel so bad because you have twins?" And I'm just like, I don't think so. They don't run in the family, but if they do, then we have twins. And it turns out that we did. That was why I was so nauseous, why I was so tired, why the symptoms were just seemed like they were doubled. But it was a very smooth pregnancy. I told my midwife, hey, I'm having twins. Can you still take me on? And she says, give me a moment. And then she responds, I think she responds within a few hours, and she's like, "Yes, I can take you on.
Mhm.
We might have to just do a little bit more, appointments, but we'll work through it." So I was so happy because I did not want to go to the hospital, but there was that back in my mind. I was like, I might need to. I might need to go to the hospital just in case, because they always tell you, if there's twins, if there's multiples, you have to have them at the hospital. But again, it's that Holy Spirit telling me, I think you can have them at home. Like, you're
Mm.
going to have them at home. And at that point, I trusted my midwife. She did an amazing job with our first home birth. And we had built such a connection, such a relationship with her, that I wanted her to be my midwife again. And I wanted to do this at home. And I am so happy that she said yes. And it was her first set of twins that she had delivered. She had been at other, births when she was a doula with twins, but these were the first where, she was the main midwife for. So it was a learning experience for the both of us. And because I trusted her, I didn't mind that it was her first time, being the main midwife. We had just built just a great relationship, that I knew that if there was at any point where she couldn't help me anymore, that she would either find the resources or tell me up front, you're going to have to go to the hospital. So fortunately, that never happened. The one thing
Mhm.
she did recommend, though, was dual care with an OB.
Mhm.
So we're like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Let's do dual care. We found an OB that's home birth friendly. Thankfully, we had, I had the first appointment, and I told the midwife what my plans were. I never wanted to keep it a secret from anyone, that my goal was to have an intervention free birth at home. And the first midwife was okay with it. She was like, you know what? Yeah, I think you can do it. As long as, your babies are head down and they reach full term, I think you can have them at home. And I'm like, great, perfect. So a month passes by and I have to go to another appointment, and I have a different midwife. And this midwife, it wasn't a great experience. It was the typical, oh, you're going to have them at home. You're going to die.
Yeah. Mhm.
And my husband came to that appointment
Mm.
with me. And when she said that, because again, I was going to be very upfront and transparent what my birth plan was, And when I said home birth, she said, "Oh, I don't think you can do that. You're going. This is very risky, and you and your babies could die." And at that point, I was already, knee deep in learning about birth and pregnancy. So we challenged her. My husband said, "That's a pretty, serious statement. Can you give us the statistics on that? Can you give us, the research that you've, followed? Can you tell us your experiences with this?" And her response, I don't think that she's ever been challenged. So she said, "Oh, I don't have that right now, but next time, we can talk about that." And we're like, "Well, no, I want that information right now, because if you're giving us this information, you know, we're assuming that you already know your facts." She got very flustered and she said, "Well, I don't have it with me right now, but I want you to have the birth you want. But, our main OB, he's not going to want that, but you never know. He always surprises us." And so my question to her was like, "Okay, so if you're telling me right now that the main OB is going to kick us out of, this, out of your care, his care, should I find a new OB?" And she said, "Well, maybe. I don't know. It'll be a liability, and he'll say no, but he always surprises me." So I asked her again, "Should I find a new OB?" And she says, "No. Wait until you see Dr. Roland, and you will see what he says." And thankfully, Dr. Roland, and I'm comfortable naming him because he's just so amazing and so respectful and sweet. When we saw him, we talked about that experience, and he said, "Oh, well, as a medical provider, yes, I don't recommend a home birth for your twins, but I will respect your wishes. And if there's anything that I see that concerns me, I will let you know, and I will make you give us an informed consent with whatever it is that you want to do." Um,
Wow.
yeah,
All right, Dr. Roland.
we were prepared. We were prepared to fight with him too,
Yeah.
but he said, "No, of course, I'm a medical provider. I say no, but you're my client, so you get to call the shots." So we were happy about that. And after that, all of our appointments were only with him. I only wanted to see him because I didn't want to deal with anybody else. And he was just so awesome with everything. The discussion of breech birth did come up because it had to. With twins, it's always a possibility, more than not, that you're going to have a breech baby. And so I tell him, if I have a breech baby and I have to give birth at a hospital, will you help me with that? And at first he said no. And I challenged him on that. I asked him, I kind of like, poked at his ego a little bit. Is it because you don't want to, or you don't know how to? You're not trained. And he says, "Well, I'm trained." Like, okay, then we shouldn't have an issue.
I love this.
He's like, "Yeah, then we shouldn't have an issue, right?" He was like, "No, we shouldn't have an issue." And so he agreed to that. And then the another thing that came up was laboring in the operating room. I didn't want to do that, and I tell him, "Okay, so I don't want to birth at an operating room, and I'm confident that I have a healthy pregnancy because no one has told me otherwise. So can we just labor, in the regular room if I were to, need to be here?" And he said, "Well, it's standard procedure that you're in the operating room." And I tell him, "Doctor, if you put me in an operating room, I will run away and birth my babies in the darkest closet that I can find in the hospital." And then he says, "Well, we'll see what we can do." So I just, challenged him little by little. And, he, of course, he was hesitant with a lot of the things that I wanted, but he was very respectful. Thankfully, though, my babies made it to full term, 36 weeks, and we didn't need, Dr. Roland. Although if I ever, did need him, I would trust him. He was just so great throughout everything. But yes, this time around, my water has never broken. But this time around, come midnight, my water breaks, and I just stand there. I'm frozen. And my husband says that I tend to do this, that I look like a ghost. That I'm just frozen. And he wakes up because I guess he senses me, and he says, "What's going on?" Like, "My water broke." And he says, "Oh, so we're gonna have babies?" I'm like, "I think so." So he calls the midwife, and she says, "Yeah, how are you feeling?" I had no contractions, so I tell her like, "Yeah, I have no contractions. It was just my water breaking." So she tells us to go back to sleep. So we do. 7 a.m. comes around, still no contractions, but my fluids kept coming out. And she says, "Well, you can, if you wanted to have your babies, you can take the midwife's brew, and we can maybe get things going." And I said, "Okay, let's do it," because my water had broken and a lot of fluid had come out, and I was just like, well, maybe I should have my babies. And I was starting to contract after that, but it wasn't consistent. And my husband and I talked about it, and like, yeah, let's do it, because we just don't want to end up at a hospital. So we did it, and lunchtime comes around noon, and everything comes full force. Contractions, one one after another. We call the midwife. Her assistants get here. Two of her assistants get here. I feel the need to push. I tell my husband, I think I need to poop. And he says, "Sweetie, I really don't think that you need to poop." And I tell him, "I need to poop." And he's like, "You know what? I don't think so, but let's walk over to the toilet and let's see what happens."
Let's see what comes out.
Yeah, but he knew. Nothing came out. I didn't need to poop. I just wanted to get my babies out. But it was only the assistants that were here, and I wanted my midwife here. Um, and it was my midwife and six other midwives. I think like all of the midwives in Chattanooga came to my birth, and they were all amazing, and I love them all. But as soon as I heard her voice come in to the door, I was like, all right, all bets are off. I'm pushing. I started pushing. She's not even in the room, and I start pushing. But there's something really comforting about hearing your midwife's voice when you're in labor. You're like, oh, she's here. So everything, I got really loose, and I started to push, and all of the other midwives got here, and baby A was Breech. They were both Breech the entire time. None of them wanted to flip around, and we're like, you know what? I guess this is it. I did spinning babies. I did everything that you hear that you should do, but they're just so stubborn and they didn't want to. So we're like, all right, I guess we're gonna do it this way. And thankfully, one of the we call her the OG midwife. She's attended many twin home births, breech births, so she was very confident in what she was doing, and we trusted her too. So even if both babies were both breech, any breech presentation, we were ready for it.
Mhm.
Baby A was Frank Breech, and I will say that it was my easiest baby to ever push out.
That's awesome.
It was just a few pushes, and I don't think I even remember feeling the ring of fire. He was he was just so easy to push out.
Mm. Wow.
They were both 6 pounds.
Okay, so yeah, now to be fair, that is like it's only 2/3 of your previous size baby, right?
That's
Like,
true. So maybe that's why I think it might have been easier, because they were only 6 pound babies. But as soon as baby A came out, I think it was a good maybe 45 minutes to an hour until baby B wanted to come out. And he actually flipped. So he did come down head first. And he was a little bit harder to push out, and I
mm,
did feel the ring of fire. So I don't know if it's easier to push out breech babies or not, but for me, that's how it went. They were both out. It was just such a great experience. And I'll go back to baby A because
mhm,
my mom, she's always here for my births. And this, when I was in labor pushing, she wasn't here yet, but she came in, I think maybe just a few pushes before the baby came out.
mm.
So I'm like, busy. My mind's in labor land. I'm pushing, and I hear a woman speaking in Spanish. We're Mexican American. So I hear a woman speaking Spanish. I'm like, wait a minute, no one else here speaks Spanish but me. So who is this? So I look, and it's my mom, and she's there. She made it just in time. So it was so great. She tells me later that when the Uber came and dropped her off, the Uber driver's like, "Why are there so many cars? Or like, is there something wrong here?" My mom's like, "No, my daughter's having babies." So I'm just so happy that she was able to make it, and hear her voice. It's just so comforting when you hear your mom, hearing when you're giving birth. And again, during that transition time, you just give everything to God, and He takes it all.
Mm,
Yes, you do feel the pain. It's intense. I like to call it intensity. You can feel, how intense it is, but when you're able to just, feel him, you're like, okay, whatever. I'll
mhm.
take whatever I need to take to be able to feel his presence here.
Wow.
So you do that and completely surrender to him, and everything goes great.
Mm,
Babies come out. they This time again, I want to hold them immediately, chest to chest, skin to skin. They did have tongue ties as well. All of my kids have tongue ties, but theirs were a little bit harder,
mm,
or a lot tougher for them to breastfeed. So we did have to syringe feed for the first few days until we were able to get them corrected.
mm.
But that was my twin birth.
Wow.
It felt like it was fast and furious.
Yeah, do you know what the time was?
4 to 6 hours, maybe, give or
Gosh.
take.
And then a question that's coming to my mind. So after you have baby A, number one, or so two questions actually. Were you holding him pretty much the entire time between when he was born to when your second baby was born? Like, were you holding him, or did you put him, like, give him to your husband when baby B was being born? And then second question is, did you experience like a second transition before you had baby B, or did you kind of like, did the contractions stop and then ramp up again right before pushing?
Yes, so for baby A, when I held him for a good amount of time, and then once I started feeling those contractions again, because I didn't go through a second transition, it just things mellowed down, and then the contractions picked back up, and we're like, oh, that's baby B.
Mm,
I did hand him over to my husband because, again, I'm a tiny woman,
yeah.
and they were so big and they were so heavy that for that birth it was hard for me to move around as like I
Mhm,
wanted to. So I was on my side and I handed him over so I can focus on pushing baby B out.
mhm,
But as soon as they were both out, both of them were handed to me, and
mm.
oh, it's just so magical having both babies.
Wow.
You're done and you're like, whoa,
What?
two.
Double double gifted? What? Oh my goodness. Okay, so but you're saying basically there's the mellow time after you have your first, and then when the contractions came back, they were pushing contractions?
They were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could feel it immediately. Not like
Yeah.
transition time, but you can, feel it. You're like, okay, all right, let me get back to
Mhm.
work.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense that you were already fully dilated, so like that it would just go straight into pushing, but I'm just trying to get a picture painted in my mind of how that went down. Oh, other question. Okay, so let's talk about what type of twins that they were, and then could we talk about the placenta and how all of that worked?
Yeah, so they are die twins, fraternal. Um, Although you couldn't really tell when they were born, they looked alike. I think for the first 2 weeks we didn't know who was who. But yeah, they're die twins, fraternal. The placenta, they both each had their placentas, but they fused together. So when I pushed out my placenta, um, when I was holding both of my babies, I remember from the corner of my eye, the placenta was in our bathroom. And the midwives were like around the placenta just looking at it, and it was huge. And I'm sure it was because it had fused together, but it was huge. It looked heavy, and in my mind, I'm just wondering, like, wow, like, how did I have that inside me? It looks so
Crazy.
big.
Yeah. Amazing. Gosh. Oh my goodness, Scarlen. What a beautiful story. How neat to have all of the Chattanooga midwives with you. And I know that before we spoke, you had talked about how this kind of changed your trajectory. Like this birth experience really changed your passion and your desire for community. So could we kind of jump into that?
Yes. So after just, having, all of the midwives here and assistants as well, and having such a great postpartum, I was expecting maybe like a more difficult postpartum because they were twins. Yes, physically, I felt horrible physically, but I birthed out two babies, so it was expected. But um, mentally, I was doing well. Spiritually, I was doing well too. So I was just thinking, like, man, I really would love for any woman who wants this to experience this. How do I do it? I have so much knowledge because during my twin pregnancy, I did so much research. I listened to all of the podcasts, including yours. I was on the hunt for twin home birth stories, and people recommended your podcast. So I listened to so many, people, read books, and I just wanted everyone to know about this. I wanted them to know, hey, you can have your babies at home, even if they're twins. You can have your babies at home, even if it's just one. And that the transition time when I can always feel God's presence. I wanted people to feel that. Yes, everything else is great, but I wanted women to feel that. I wanted families to feel that. So that's where, like, let me start a home birth group. I don't think there's any in Chattanooga, so let me start it. It's just a Facebook group, and let's see what happens. And I'm pretty strong in my opinions and my convictions as well. So I knew that this group was going to honor God and honor, His one and only truth, and that is that only women have the gift of bearing children. Only women have the gift of being pregnant, and I was not going to stand for anyone calling us chest feeders or birthing persons. So that's a pretty clear message within my group. In order for you to be a part of it, you have to agree to that. You don't have to be Christian, but it's great if you are, because a lot of the content in there is very Christ centered. Um, but it's just a Facebook group, and I didn't really think anything was going to come out of it. Just maybe like a few people joining, but I had a lot of people join, and little by little, 400 women that have joined, birth workers, and I decided to create a directory where local birth workers like doulas, midwives, birth photographers, or anyone who has services that could benefit home birth families. I put them in the directory. So at this point, I think I have almost every single Chattanooga local midwife on the group. We have so many doulas on there, so many birth photographers, pediatricians, and family doctors that respect medical decisions, chiropractors, women that do belly binding, and just so many services that home birth moms could benefit from. And that's, I think, our most sought after feature, because a lot of women want to get connected. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is that we've been able to connect so many women, so many mothers to our local birth workers, and even women that were in the just regular medical system, just going through the motions with them. There have been some mothers that have switched their plans completely because of this group. So I am like so happy and honored that this space that I created, um, and just with a Facebook group that isn't always friendly towards my views or my opinions, was has been able to be used by God to give other mothers the experience that I experienced. So I've had mothers that were maybe 36, 38 weeks switch,
Wow.
and the midwives there have been amazing. They've if they have availability, they'll take them.
Yeah. Oh,
A lot of
nice.
mothers that have been able to find their doulas there to provide them the support, even if they haven't been able to have that home birth that they wanted, have still a doula to support them. uh, I do hope to become an organization, a 501c3 organization, where we can raise funds to sponsor home births, because I don't want it to be a barrier for families that truly want to experience this. And that's what I found people say, I would love a home birth. Families say, I would love a home birth, but we just can't afford it. We're going to go the insurance route because insurance pays for it. Although I do think that it's worth the investment. It's worth the investment to have your home birth, but I understand, that there may be other priorities or, other situations. And I want to, I want to be able to pay for some of that, raise funds and have family experience what I experienced. Because why not?
I mean, look at you changing the trajectory of people's birthing experiences, but how that also changes the trajectory of their lives. You've experienced that where it's like all of these life changes occur, and so much of it is related to how we experience giving birth and entering or re-entering motherhood, and just all of the depth that that experience can hold. Here you are providing a space to share this with other people, and they're listening and they're making changes, and that is impacting their family for the better. That is absolutely a beautiful ministry, Scarlen.
Yeah, and this all glory to God. I just have the laptop to do it and the Facebook, but he gave it all. He gave me the idea. He gave me the ability to do this. And it's funny because I'm a very introverted person, so I don't really go out there and socialize too much. But when it comes to this, I'm so passionate about it that I will get out of that comfort zone, and I will speak about home birth anytime I can.
Gosh. Well, I would love, as we're wrapping up here, Scarlin, would you just share a little bit about your most recent birth that happened in March of this year? And then I'd love to give you an opportunity to tell us where people can find your group if they're local to you, and all of the other things like that.
Yeah, so our little fifth baby boy joined us March 24th. And that birth, it was very different from my other births. I mean, we had a lot of life stuff going on, so it was a little bit more stressful. And it almost turned into a transfer only because my pregnancies have been back to back. And so I've been very depleted, like nutritionally. I've been very depleted. Just my body, my pelvic floor, everything seems wrecked. For this birth, we had a lot going on and a lot of stressful things going on, but the pregnancy was smooth. He was a pretty big baby. People thought that I was having twins again. We didn't though. I did make sure to get an ultrasound just to be prepared for it. If we were gonna have two, it would have been amazing. Would have been blessed. But we wanted to be prepared for it.
Mhm.
Just one though, just one baby, smooth pregnancy, stressful environment. For this one, I had a birth photographer, and it was a complete game changer. Now I wish that I had him for all of my other
Mhm.
births, but whatever. He was a lot harder to push out.
Mhm.
He ended up being, I think, like 10.5 pounds. I
Woo-hoo,
know.
baby.
Shoulder dystocia again.
Yeah.
And for this one, it was so hard to push him out. My body was so weak.
Mm.
I didn't know if it was normal or not, and it didn't feel normal because my other births, I was able to push my babies out, and everything. My husband prayed for me. Uh, you know, I surrendered, but there's just something that wasn't going the way that I thought it was going. So I did ask, to be transferred to the hospital. I didn't have to though. We had the firefighters come here and everything, show up, and my midwife, I love her so much. She says, "You know what? We can do it. You can transfer, but that's not going to change the fact that you're going to have a baby in an ambulance."
Mhm.
And
Mm.
I'm just like, "Oh, that's true." So I kept pushing, and he came out. Uh, I do think that was a God thing, though. My body felt so weak that every single push didn't really feel like it was doing anything. So I
Mm.
kept telling my husband, like, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. This isn't normal. And that's why we decided to call, an ambulance, because I just didn't think that I was progressing. But at the end, I pushed. It was a very weak push, but I think God just did it.
Mm.
It,
Wow.
it wasn't the it wasn't the reflex either, the ejection
Yeah.
reflex. I think it was him.
Mm.
Yeah, he was
Wow.
like, you know what? Nope. I'm gonna show you that you don't need to go to a hospital. You can do it. And I told my husband at the end, like, yeah, that wasn't me pushing, because it wasn't even like, it wasn't a hard push. It was a very, weak push that would
Mm.
not push out a baby.
Mm.
But he helped me.
I just love it. I love your perspective. It's just so beautiful. Scarlin, would you share for anyone local, or I don't know if you have resources for other things as well, but for anyone local, would you share your Facebook group, or could we link it below?
Yeah, so you just search on Facebook Chattanooga Home Birth Community, and it's the only one that will pop up.
Perfect. Perfect. This has been an absolute honor, an absolute joy. I feel so filled and just so happy to have been able to have this conversation with you, Scarlin. Thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
How good are you feeling right now? I am just feeling on cloud nine coming off of this conversation. Scarlen and her husband Manny have had such a beautiful journey together. And as we enter today's episode roundup, I have a few topics that I'd like to cover. Number one, the way we are treated in birth matters when it comes to bonding. Scarlen shared how different she felt after giving birth to her first baby compared to her subsequent home births. She felt angry and disconnected because of the way that she had been treated. This interfered with the cascade of hormones of birth and took away from the euphoric experience that is common after childbirth, especially with an unmedicated birth. With her home births, Scarlen was able to experience the fullness of labor and birth and to feel present as her babies entered her arms. She felt the joy and the love well up, just as she had always wanted to. This matters. Wherever you give birth, it matters how you are treated. Being in a hospital does not excuse providers from being inhuman. If you were mistreated during your birth, if you feel capable of doing it now, please complain. Please let these people know that what they are doing is wrong. The system has to change, and it's going to take our voices to change it. Next, the boldness. Wow, Scarlen and Manny were not going to be coerced. You could see this with Scarlen in her work situation when she had to fight for her right to avoid an experimental shot. And again, when she and Manny asked questions of their care providers that made them uncomfortable during their twin pregnancy. They were so clearly walking in their faith and they were unafraid. There's nothing more powerful than living fearlessly, and that's what I see in Scarlen's story. And finally, when you are changed, you can't help but share. Scarlen's life was transformed on multiple levels, but her birth experience, especially after her twin birth, gave her a desire to help and encourage others. She is providing fellowship, information, and choices to her local community within the Facebook group she's created, and her desire to create a system where she can help support families who need financial assistance have the birth of their dreams. Oh my goodness, it truly shows her beautiful heart to serve. I am so encouraged. What an amazing woman. What an amazing family. What an amazing story. That's all I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.